Being wrong doesn't feel uncomfortable, it feels unsafe. And if you're a high performer or leader, this is probably running more of your life than you'd care to realize. And it's not because you have a big ego, it's because at some point in time, being wrong stopped feeling neutral. It started to feel as if something were at risk. And that could be your reputation, your intelligence, or more importantly, your worth. So instead of learning, you started protecting. Instead of putting yourself out there, you started closing yourself off. If we haven't met before, my name is Nick Von Pitt. I work with high-performing founders, leaders, and parents, not just on strategy, but on how they think, respond, and most importantly, show up when under pressure. Because most of what holds people back isn't external, it's happening internally. And this is one of those things. Let's take a moment and dive a little bit deeper and uncover what's underneath this mechanic. This isn't about ego, this is about protection. So what you're looking at here is the architecture of defensiveness. Something happens, there's feedback, there's pressure, and then a decision. And instead of processing it cleanly and simply, you find yourself becoming defensive. You find ways to justify, you find ways to explain, and you dissociate. You end up closing. And it's not because you're necessarily trying to win, but because something in you is essentially trying to find that safe space. And this is where it starts to get really expensive. High performers don't actually fear failure, they fear exposure. Because failure is external, but exposure, well, that feels internal. It feels like being seen. It's this whole process of not measuring up. So over time, excellence quietly shifts into this need to control. You're having to control everything. And growth, expansion, gets replaced with protection. So what that means is control ends up protecting you. The more control you have, the more protected you may feel. And the cost of that is bigger than most people realize. This is what it actually costs you. Your thinking becomes rigid because you can't afford to be wrong. There's a massive drop in your adaptability because new information feels like a threat to your identity. You lose emotional range because everything is filtered through defense. And your leadership, and this might alarm you, people stop bringing you that truth. They stop sharing what's really happening, be it in your workspace or around you. And there's a reflection that takes place because if you need to be right, they don't feel safe enough to be wrong around you. And when people don't feel safe, they stop thinking, they shut down, and they're having to compartmentalize their department, their space. This is going to come through in your relationships. This is going to come through in your parenting. This is going to happen on an internal level inside of yourself. You will not want to come forth with those parts of you that could be wrong at that moment in time, that will make you feel unsafe, that will end up feeling vulnerable because they are seen and they are exposed. So where does this actually come from? This doesn't start when you're in business, it actually starts much earlier. And at some point, you learn that a version of you was safe to be when you got approval, when you avoided a sense of rejection, and when you were able to stay connected to your primary caregiver. And anything outside of that felt exceptionally risky. And so you had to adapt. You had to consciously but intelligently adapt over time. And you establish this mechanic because it would sustain you. It would keep you safe. It would allow you to flourish to the best of your ability. And this shows up differently for both men and women. And it comes through this shame mechanic. When you're looking at the masculine expression, it's not to be perceived as weak. When you look at the feminine expression, it's, I'll do it perfectly and never let you see me sweat. And it's really interesting just to see how this comes up. And just from a behavioral perspective, you've got on the masculine side a rigid, emotional, controlling focus. There's a pursuit of status. There's a relying on aggression or dominance to shield against this vulnerability. And actually, it comes through as anger as well. When you look within the feminine expression, there's this exhaustion, this over-accommodation, it's obsessive perfectionism, it's staying quiet, it's taking on the emotional labor of everyone else around them. And that in itself should give you a clear indication that both of these strategies are doing their absolute best to avoid rejection. But this is where that perfectionism, that needing to be right, really does affect you on an identity level. And this is at the core of it. So a mistake will happen, and instead of it just staying as a behavior, it becomes identity. Again, that didn't go well, it turns into I'm not good enough. And once that begins to happen, you're no longer responding to the moment. You are essentially defending who you believe you are. And there's the guilt piece that comes in. You've got your mistake plus identity fusion equals shame. And shame is what you're doing to yourself on an internal level. It becomes a deeply personal bombardment of I am not good enough. And you're striving for all these ideals, and you're basing it on assumptions and what other people have, projected onto you. But it's not true, and you've just chosen to believe that. And look, when this happens, you are no longer responding to the moment. You are defending who you are. And then we look at behavior and identity, and this is one of the separations that most people have never made. And it's separating who you are to what you do. And this is where the nervous system essentially comes in. So once identity, feels threatened, your system doesn't stay neutral. It reacts. You're going to fight, where there's this need to defend, control, and push, or flight, where you're overthinking, avoiding, or justifying. Freeze, where there is this shutdown, second guessing. And from that state, you don't have access to clarity. You only have access to protection. And the thing is, we then start looking at how shame in itself reinforces itself in the sequence. So you've got an idea between the identity, the trigger, which would be the guilt, and the action and the behavior, and then we connect it to our identity, and then we internalize it and it becomes shame. And I think this really reinforces what you're essentially experiencing on an internal level, which is step one. You've got the workplace trigger. You've got step two, which then moves into reactivation of this primitive childhood shame. I'm inadequate, for example. You move into step three, where there's this 10 out of 10 internal threat state. Your nervous system just goes to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Step four, there's defensive coping. So depending on, it's the fight, flight, or freeze. Step five, we then move into severe disconnection and loss of team trust. And step six, there's isolation, reinforces that deep-seated fear of being unlovable, unsafe, and priming the system for the next trigger. And that step six is what you will be doing to yourself through rumination, through insidious ants that are just running through your mind over and over again. And you're looking for proof, you're looking for reasons to berate yourself for not achieving, not meeting a certain milestone, not being good enough. My question to you is, does that sound fair? Would you expect this from a child? Would you expect this from your team members? Would you expect your partner to be doing this to themselves on a day-to-day basis if they did not meet their expectations or the perceived expectations that have been projected onto them as individuals in whatever that role is? And this is not in any way, shape, or form trying to lessen the importance of performance and of showing up and of doing your best and of reaching certain targets. It's the complete opposite. It's really recognizing the driver behind you doing what you're doing. And if it is coming from you, and you're recognizing that you are doing your best and you are showing up, and even if you never reach that target, you figure out why. You adjust the skill set. You enhance where you can, but you don't attack and berate yourself in the process. And it's creating that separation and understanding the difference between the two that amplifies your communication, amplifies your leadership, amplifies your parenting, amplifies how you connect with your partner on a day-to-day basis. And more importantly, it allows you to improve the relationship that you have with yourself. And I want to share this last piece with you so you have a tool that you can use, and call this a real-time regulation toolkit when you find yourself experiencing this. Step 1, use the neural break. So the physiological sigh, so 2 inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth, and this manually engages the parasympathetic nervous system and it helps you move out of that threat response. Step 2 is an AVP protocol. So acknowledgement of the feeling, validation that makes biological sense, and permit it to be there without reacting to it. Stop, drop, and breathe is another way to put it. And lastly, step 3 is self-repair. So reestablish the gap of, I'm a good leader who had a hard time making a bad decision, and prevent a minor mistake from becoming an identity crisis. If you can do any one of these steps, you will make a significant difference to yourself, to your team, and how you're moving about your day. If you found this video helpful and informative, please leave a like and subscribe and share. Thank you for your support and taking the time to really get to learn more about yourself within this process. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper, I have an energy leak quiz where you can get clearer on your capacity and where you're functioning from on a day-to-day basis. It's in the description below. And if you feel called to dive deep into yourself, or you want to optimize your business and your team, feel free to reach out. Link is in the description below, and you can apply for coaching pending availability. Have an incredible day, and know that you have the ability to make the shift.